Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Alex Paul from InvestorStream, and I'll be your host today. This morning, we have Besra Gold CEO, Dr. Ray Shaw, who will provide us with an overview of Besra's JORC 3.3 million ounce Bau Gold Project in Sarawak, East Malaysia. Dr. Shaw will also outline Besra's plans for the forthcoming drill program, from which Besra targets improved grade and increased resources. Following the presentation, Ray will be available to address any questions you may have, and you can send those questions through via the chat platform in the question pane in the GoToWebinar control panel, or simply email them to me at alex@investorstream.com.au. You can also download a copy of the presentation by navigating to the handouts pane in the control panel. And finally, a copy of the webinar will also be available on Besra's website and social media platforms later today. But for now, I'd like to throw it over to Ray, who's going to kick things off for us. Ray, the floor is yours.
Thanks very much then for that, Alex. Appreciate everybody taking the time to listen to our first webinar for Besra, the company, of course, having listed in the last 3 weeks or so. As Alex said, I'm the incoming CEO, and I'm very pleased to be here and present to you what I believe is a truly standout opportunity. I've been in the resources sector for some decades, and when you see a project of the caliber of Bau, you are very, it's with great pleasure that you have the opportunity to be involved with it. So if we could just skip through the usual disclaimers and move to the first slide. Thanks, Alex. Just go to the first slide here. Okay, so Besra is very much an opportunity that is primed for growth. If you go back, please. If you go back one. Yeah, we're very much primed for growth. Key things about Besra, and the reason I say that is we have a very large resource base. We already have 3.3 million ounces of JORC resource. On top of that, we've got an exploration target for an extra 4.9 to 9.3 million ounces. So those two combined potentially mean that our sole project, the Bau Gold Project, is very much has the potential of becoming a first quartile new gold development opportunity in Southeast Asia. To crystallize on that potential, we have a very focused strategy. We're looking at commencing drilling in the next 3 weeks, and we're seeking to target a 5 million ounce resource inventory. That will allow us to optimize our pre-production plans. Besra, as it exists now with the 3.3 million ounces, already has a highly attractive metric of less than $15 per ounce, enterprise value per ounce. And the key project, as you can see on the diagrams on the right side of the slide, is our Bau Gold Project, shown there in the green in the inset. And that's located on the island of Borneo in the state of Sarawak, which is part of the Federation of Malaysia. As such, it's in a very stable jurisdiction with as a Commonwealth country, and where we are located has ready access to infrastructure and a school space. So if we could just move to the next slide, please, Alex. This shows very much a sort of drone's eye view of the setting in which Bau is located. For a start, you can see the Kuching city, which is the capital of Sarawak, about 600,000 people. It's about a 30-minute comfortable drive by all-weather road down to our key Bau Gold Project, which is a corridor of about 15 by 8 kilometres. Kuching itself has got a deep water port. It has an international airport, and obviously as a capital city, it is well connected with infrastructure. So we have full access to electricity, water, and of course communications. Within the Bau corridor itself, we have a number of key deposit areas which are shown. In the foreground is the region of Pedroo, which I'll talk to in a little while. Then in the midground we have Bekajan, and Bekajan is located near the township of Bau, which has a population of about 6,000 people. And then in the distance there we have Dugan. Now this area has historically been involved with gold mining for the last 150 years. It's currently an area of limestone quarrying, and you could see the prominent topography, which are the limestone hills of the Bau limestone. Our key areas of focus and where we'll be looking to do our drilling program are located in the lower ground areas away from that rugged topography. And this is a region, because of the existing quarrying and past history, it's an area which is strongly connected to mining. Besra itself has been involved in this area for over 15 years, and together with its joint venture parties, that connection extends back to the late 1970s. So this is an area, whilst Besra is just listed in the last few weeks, it comes with a very long history and a strong history of mining in this region. Besra and its antecedents have spent over $60 million US of their own funds, and of course in doing that they have developed a very extensive database, including more than 250,000 meters of drilling. If I could just go to the next slide, please, Alex. That has resulted, as I said at the outset, with a current JORC resource of 3.3 million ounces, and that comprises 1.12 million ounces of measured and indicated, and 2.1 million ounces of inferred classification resources. Now you can see the grade of the measured and indicated there on the bottom row is 1.6 grams, and that for the inferred is 1.3 grams. Importantly, this resource, 80% of these resources occur within about 70 meters, 80 meters of the surface. So this is an opportunity which is very much, with those grades, very much attractive to open pit development in the future. In addition to this resource, if we could turn to the next slide, we have an exploration target of 4.9 to 9.3 million ounces. Normally when a company, when you get a new listing, a company might come on, and if it's got a resource of 1 million ounces or 2 million ounces, you assume that the exploration potential has been pretty much exhausted. Well, Besra is quite distinct and totally different to that situation. Not only do we have 3.3 million ounces already on the books, but we have an enormous upside potential for growth, and that's the 4.9 to 9.3 million ounces. And as I said earlier, being able to properly crystallize this potential allows us to contemplate quite realistically that this is a new top quartile mining development opportunity in Southeast Asia. And so, as you can see here, just on the basis of 5 deposits, we have an exploration potential which is related to essentially extending out from the existing wireframes of the resources. The other reason why we're very comfortable with this sort of range of exploration target is the style of mineralization itself. The mineralization at Bau has been likened to that of the Carlin style mineralization. That is a disseminated gold mineralization associated with sulfides, which is named after the Carlin region of Nevada. Now, the importance of that is, and you can check it out on Wikipedia, up until 2017, Carlin produced over 200 million ounces. That's 200 million ounces, or 6,400 tons of gold from this style of mineralization. It was the catalyst for why Newmont and Barrick became the major mining houses they are today. Suffice to say, there aren't too many places in the world where you find this Carlin style of mineralization. It's been identified in Alaska and China, and we believe a lot of the scientific published work has indicated similarities to what we have here at Besra. The fact that our mineralization occurs over an 8 by 15 kilometer corridor tells us that we have a very large active plumbing system in this region. And so by the analogues with the Carlin style mineralization, we're very comfortable about the ability to increase our resource quite quickly and hence underpin our strong growth strategy. Could I have the next slide, please? So how are we going to go about increasing our resource potential? As I mentioned, we're going to start drilling within the next 3 weeks, and I'll just start off with some examples. Pedroo, which was the area closest to us on that drone's eye view of the corridor. This map on the right side, what's shown in red there is actually the wireframe of the resources. Those resources within that red footprint represent 997,000 ounces of JORC delineated gold. The little tacks that you can see there are the positions of the historical drilling in this area. It's all inferred, but it's all gold that has been delineated on the basis of drilling to no more than about 70 meters depth. So it's all shallow gold. The majority of the gold is actually occurs within about 30 or 50 meters of the surface beneath the overlying Pedroo shale at the top of the Bower limestone. So geologically, it's a very predictable type of occurrence. The other thing that you can see on here is the right angle bend in the wireframe. And this just reflects the fact, and you can see the traces of interpreted faults. There's a strong structural control. And for those of you who are used to dealing in the eastern goldfields of WA, etc., where you're talking about plumbing systems that are 2.5 billion years old, and you've had multiple episodes of geological compression and deformation, this area, the actual source of the gold mineralization, which is associated with shallow intrusive bodies, is mid-tertiary in age. It's about 25 to 30 million years old. And importantly, the fluids that have risen up with those intrusives that have got the mineralization in them are very much controlled by the faulting. And that faulting can be readily seen from satellite imagery. Hence, you can see here the elbow in the wireframe, and that provides us with predictability in terms of where the mineralization has spread immediately under the impermeable shales along the top of the more porous limestone areas. So in this area, what we're intending to do with our drilling program is basically go into additional step out and infill drilling and essentially increase the classification. So we go from inferred to indicated and measured, and also step out along strike and at depth, because the inferred drilling and the drilling density that we've got to date has not yet fully delineated the extent of this feature. And just to indicate that, if we go to the next slide, this highlights the potential of what we've got just at this one particular project area at Pedroo. If you look at the top figure on the right-hand side, you may be able to make out that you can almost rule a line across there, that all the drill holes there finish at about 70 meters subsurface. And yet in that area, the wireframe that's shown there in the red at the top, you can see there's some intersections. For example, in the drill hole KPRCO2, there's 16 meters at the base at 12.8 grams. There's another one there, 32 meters at 11.4 grams, 55 meters at 2.3 grams. Now, given that our average in this southern Pedroo area is 1.2 grams, you say, hang on, what's going on here? How come we've got areas that are showing such strong sweet spots? And part of the reason for this is the nature how the mineralization got here in the first place. I said to you before that the fluids, the mineralized fluids, ran along on the more permeable limestones just beneath the shale cap at about 30 to 50 meters depth. The sources of those mineralized fluids are actually centralized points, typically associated with intersecting faults, where the intrusives have been able to come up and carry the mineralized fluids with them. So what we find is that in addition to the more strata-bound distribution of gold endowment, there are these sweet spots, typically at the intersections of faults, where, as we see here, and on the figure on the bottom, you can see this is a geophysical anomaly showing a conductivity feature in red, and that black line represents the footprint of the cross-section above. And across this anomaly, this conductivity anomaly, is where we believe we have one of these underlying intrusive bodies, which has allowed for the mineralization to rise towards the surface. So where you're more proximal to these bodies, you're seeing grades of mineralization which are very, very high, much higher than the average. Now you might ask yourself, well, why didn't the previous explorers in this area drill out these features? And the simple answer is that because this is Carlin style of mineralization, you don't actually see the physical gold in the core. It's typically bound up covalently with the sulfide minerals. And so it's not until you get the assay results later on that you can actually appreciate what the distribution of mineralization is in the core. So one of the things that we're going to do as part of our drilling program, which is going to start in the next 3 weeks, just go to the next slide, please, Alex. And it's not rocket science. This is a cutaway block of what we're just looking at. So you can see the drill holes with the intersections up shallow down to about 70 meters. We've got the cartoon down there showing where we think the conductivity anomaly is based on that geophysical anomaly you saw. So we're intending to do some additional drilling, some infill drilling up shallow, and then extend the depth of the drilling down towards that intrusive body where the previous drilling has, as I said, terminated in grades of 10, 12 grams per ton. So this type of target is precisely the sorts of things that we're looking at in terms of rapidly growing our resource, and also not only the bulk of our resource, but also the average grade of our resource in the Pedroo area. And if I could just go to the next slide. Now, we were just looking at, you can see there's Kapoor there on the shown on the figure. That's the block that I just showed you on the previous slide. We've identified 16 of these, what we refer to as vertical feeder systems, where you've got shallow intrusives, and we believe sweet spots for higher grade mineralization, higher than the average. You can see Pedroo down the bottom there, that elbow-shaped red zone that I talked to earlier. That's where, in that area alone, we've got just on 1 million ounces of inferred. The other thing you can see from this color-enhanced satellite image is the strong linearity of not only the other wireframes shown in red, but also of geophysical anomalies. And those geophysical anomalies typically represent areas where we're getting more conductive type signatures. So in this area, we have 16 of these potential features, and any one of them could be very substantial in terms of adding to the resource. And in particular, there's the last drilling that was, or the last mining that was done in the Bau Corridor was at an area called Tai Parrot. And we believe Tai Parrot was one of these, was centered on one of these vertical feeder systems, and it produced 1.2 million ounces at an average grade of 7 grams down to about 80 meters depth. And that just highlights the fact people have said, yes, well, Carlin style mineralization does provide potentially very big targets, but often the grades are low. And this is a classic example within the Bau Project where that is not necessarily the case. And we know from previous drilling that there's a lot of upside growth potential in just going back to those areas where we have intersected higher grades and doing some more forensic drilling. If we go to the next slide. So just further to highlight the fact that our 3.3 million ounce resource inventory we've got at the moment is not an exhaustive inventory. And I just mentioned Tai Parrot, and if we just look at the lower slide, you may be able to see Tai Parrot there, which was the previous mining, as I mentioned. Now, Tai Parrot when they mined that mine closed in 1996. It was still in mineralisation at 80 metres, and there was drilling on the floor of the open pit, indicating that it extended at least to 150 metres. But at that time, the price of gold had dropped to some $300, and the company that was running it was a limestone quarry company, and they didn't design the pit correctly, so they just basically ran out of space on the floor of the pit. Nevertheless, they did have a tailings dam, and that tailings dam they put down to the southeast there, and you can see that is in the area known as Bekajang. And up the top slide shows that subsequently, when the prices went back up for gold, they went in and did some additional drilling outside of the Tai Parrot area, and they produced a resource of some 670,000 ounces, and that's shown in that wireframe on the top figure there, and also highlighted in the red below. Importantly, that wireframe is a function of the fact that the drilling couldn't get up into the middle of that, almost like the hole in the donut there, because that was where the tailings dam was. And the tailings dam was very wet, and they couldn't get rigs on top of that. Now, that feature and that resource that you're seeing at the moment is an artifact purely of the drilling patterns. It is not a result of the geology. And one of the things that we're going to do is go in and drill the hole out of the donut, so as to speak. So this is just another indication, just like at Pedroo, where the typical drilling was only down to about 70 metres subsurface. In this area, you've had a classic obstacle from being able to properly delineate what the resource looks like. I can just make that point on the next slide again, which is it's a cutaway along the that perspective diagram that I showed you earlier, so that down in the Pedroo area, you can see the wireframe shown there. It hugs the surface. It's about 70 to 100 meters depth. Now there's this section actually is a composite, and the area shown on the left side, Dugan, is about 13 or 14 kilometers away from Pedroo. And Dugan, the reason why I've shown that is because it was the only area where there was any systematic deeper drilling. And this was conducted by Besra back in 2010, 2012, where they extended down, and lo and behold, they found the mineralization continued to about 380 meters. Now, the style of mineralization that we've got along the entirety of this corridor is the same. It's the same system. And yet, where they've done deeper drilling, you can see the consequences that there's mineralization down to extensive depths. And there's no reason at all that when we go back to Pedroo and start to drill out some of these sweet spots where we're seeing the higher grades in particular, there is no reason at all why we won't get similar extensions of mineralization at depth, because virtually all our deposits are open at depth. And as I said previously, 80% of our resource inventory is based on drilling, which is less than 100 meters deep. So if we just go on to the next slide, and I just quickly review the Pedroo. Pedroo is our most mature project. You can see here it's quite a different feature. It's actually in the Pedrouan shale, and as such, it's a steeply plunging mineralization zone. At shallow depths, less than 100 meters, we've got some amazing intersections. 102 meters at 1.93 grams, 57 meters at 3.9 grams, 123 meters at 2.56 grams. And what we're intending to do, as you can see from that shallower drilling there, a number of the previous drilling holes have penetrated pretty much within mineralization. So part of our drilling program we've got coming up is to go back in and reinvestigate the depth extent of some of that deeper drilling. The other thing about Pedroo is that where Besra did the previous deep drilling, for example, in that deeper hole 68A, at depth, they got 24 meters at 7 grams. And this is consistent with what we see in Carlin style mineralization. The deeper you go, typically the higher the grade you get. very similar to what we saw down at Pedroo. So another plank to our exploration program will be in this area to do some deeper drilling and further investigate the mineralisation at depth, because at the moment it is open. It is also open along strike. And just to finish off, the next slide. Thanks, Alex. The next slide, you can see Dugan down there, there's the red blob. There's actually a corridor of mineralisation along this area. And as I mentioned to you, Dugan has got 1 million ounces of resource in it, measured and indicated as well as inferred. It's our most mature project. It was subject previously to feasibility and scoping studies. And from the work that has been done, we believe that the Dugan mineralisation extended further along that corridor down towards what you can see is the A12 anomaly. Now, on the top left-hand figure is a sort of 2.5 dimensional representation. You can see Dugan shown there, the wireframe in the orange. And then you can also see in that more mauve-coloured feature, that's actually a DIGEM anomaly system, an EM anomaly. And if you have a look, the anomaly size at our known 1 million ounce Dugan deposit is far smaller than that shown on the A12 anomaly. And the A12 anomaly also has the same geochemical, geological, and other geophysical attributes as the Dugan feature. Now, very interestingly, A12 has never been drilled. And we believe that the A12 anomaly, just on the size of the signatures that we're seeing there at the moment, could well be a blind Dugan type deposit sitting on the other side of a laterally offset fault. So that will be one of the features that we will look at in the future. It has the potential, as you can see here, just comparatively, to substantially increase the resources that we have in the Dugan area. So if we just go now to the next slide, just to recap a little, this is our these are our vitals for capital structure. When we listed, market cap of 58.8 million, we raised $10 million, and we have an enterprise value of $48.8 million, strategic shareholders, and most importantly, we have a very experienced board. All the people involved have had long histories in the mining sector, and similarly, our management group have had a long history in resources, mining, and variously in our activities. Kevin Wright, for example, our project manager, lives in Malaysia and has been involved with other major Malaysian mining developments in the past. So just to finalise the last slide, we are poised for growth. We say that because we've got a very solid foundation with 3.3 million ounces. We already have a very attractive enterprise value per ounce metric. And with the drilling to start in the next 3 weeks, I think in the examples I've shown you of Pedroo, Dugan, and Bekajing, we've got a series of low risk, very accretive brownfields exploration targets, which will be able to target on what we see as a very, very significant exploration target going forward, and be able to convert some of that into our 5 million ounce resource inventory, which will then support our future development opportunities. We've got a very experienced team. We have our people, many of our people have been connected with Bau for many years. Besra has been involved with Bau for many years, so we're not newbies coming into the area. We've got more than 15 years experience, and as part of that, we know our way around. We know it's a very stable jurisdiction, and we have very easy access to infrastructure. So with that, I'd like to thank you very much for listening, and I'll open the forum for questions.
Thanks, Ray. We have had a couple of questions that have come through. The first one is, can you just talk us through what budgets are set, and does the company have the sufficient funds for the drilling program and corporate costs without a further capital raise?
Thanks for that question. Look, as I said, we've raised some $10 million, and we have a budget of $6.5 million for our drilling program. So we've got more than adequate to get on with the program that we're looking at, and obviously the targets that I've been speaking of in this presentation.
Thanks, Ray. So can you just please clarify the ownership of the tenements? How secure are Besra's economic interest in the tenements?
Look, again, thanks for that question. The tenements that we have are, as I say, we've been involved in the area for more than 15 years, and the full details, I just referred the questionnaire to our prospectus, where the full details are outlined. We're certainly very comfortable with our activities and our capacity to undertake them in our tenements, where we're focusing our attention.
Thanks, Ray. So the stock price is presently below the IPO price on small volumes. There is a strong gold price, the resource, the JORC is proven, making the value of the company substantially undervalued. Can you just talk us through why you think that might be?
Yeah, look, it's certainly, and to underline your point, we think we're extremely competitively valued at the moment, and I think to be fair, it's very much that the story of Besra is not really well known, and this is part of the reason why we're doing the webinar today. It's about getting the story across. It's about telling our investors who are in US, in Australia, and throughout Asia and Canada, just what the opportunities are. And I think, you know, on the basis of what we've presented today, and people looking at our prospectus and our website will see that we are, compared to other companies, on the basis of the metrics we've got at the moment, we're incredibly competitive and undervalued currently.
Ray, how does Malaysia compare as a mining jurisdiction against other Southeast Asian countries? And does the country have an established mining code in place?
Yeah, good question. Because Malaysia, it's got a British-based common rule of law, exactly the same as Australia. So the mining ordinance that they have is exactly reflective in what we have in Australia, New Zealand, Canada, etc. The mineral rights are owned by the Crown, and there's a licensing system. So it's a very transparent system, say, compared to some other jurisdictions where you have to have contractual relationships and all that sort of thing. So basically, yes, it's the same sort of system as we have in Australia. By the way, I should point out too that the Sarawak government is being very supportive of mining, and that's reflected in the fact that there is no royalty for gold.
Thanks, Ray. So are there any other large mining companies that operate in Malaysia?
Yes, there are. In Peninsular Malaysia, Monument Mining was involved there. In fact, our project manager, Kevin Wright, used to work with them in the past. In the Sarawak and the neighbouring Indonesian jurisdiction, the Bau is actually at the Clipsy end of a mineralisation belt, which sort of runs around through Kalimantan. And when you go into the Indonesian side of the jurisdiction in Kalimantan, there are several large mining companies along there. So it's part of a major mineralised belt, which previously ran along a paleo continental margin. So in Sarawak, no, there's not many mining companies, hard rock mining companies active. And that's purely because we've basically got the bulk of the prospective fairway. But when you go into Indonesia, there are a number of other companies involved.
So, Ray, in terms of junior explorers in Sarawak, it appears that there's been little involvement from small cap companies in the region in the past. Can you just talk us through why that might be?
Well, it's pretty much as I just mentioned. The joint venture party with which we're involved has been active in the region since the late 1970s, and they helped put together a, if you like, rationalise the very small artisanal type mining holdings of the past. They put them together into larger tenements, and in doing that, they've been able to monopolise the key areas of interest, and we now are getting the benefit of the fact that they've been able to, they had the advantage of being first movers, and so there's been very little opportunity and latitude for other companies to come in.
Does the company need to undertake any landholder or government consultation prior to the commencement of exploration? And do you think the history of mining in and around the Bau Township will aid in this engagement?
No, we don't need to undertake any further studies or approvals. And one of the very good things, as I mentioned, about the fact that Bau has a long history of mining, is that there is a supply of appropriate personnel and equipment. And indeed, our proposed drilling program, due to start in 3 weeks, is able to start so quickly precisely because there are drill rigs available in Bau, including very experienced personnel. And I should point out that a number of the people who had worked, geologists and other people who had worked with Besra in the past, exceptionally keen to come back and reconnect as we move forward. So we're very much able to tap into the networking and I guess, you know, to be fair, the enthusiasm of a lot of local people to see activities underway again.
Now, you mentioned the drilling that's set to commence at the Dugan deposit in the next 2 to 3 weeks. You may have touched on it during the presentation, but can you just restate in terms of timing how long do you envisage this program taking, and what does it exactly entail?
Look, the program entails drilling at the, as I said, at the Pedroo, the Bekajang and Dugan areas. Initially, we'll be starting with 2 rigs, and the length of the drilling will to some extent depend on where we're able to drill 24/7 as opposed to just during daylight hours. But it's a program that's going to last over a period of around about 3 months. We'd obviously be looking at 3 to 4 months anyway. We'd obviously be looking at 2 things. Firstly, expanding the program and modifying the program as we get results in and are able to provide feedback, so there's fluidity in that. The second thing is that obviously as we get, we'll be getting news flow in terms of our assay results starting to occur within the first few weeks once we get the samples off for assaying. So it'll be a fairly dynamic period for us over the next 3 to 4 months once we start drilling.
Now, just on the brownfield exploration target, if you, as you say, is it low risk? Why is there such a large target range, 4.7 to 9.3? Is this additional to the existing resource, and is your exploration target located below 100 meters?
All of the above. Basically, the point is that with the range of exploration targets, for example, if we talk about Pedroo, now we talked on the Kapor feature and the fact that we're going to drill vertically. Now, we know at Tai Parrot that these vertical feeder systems, Tai Parrot is a living, breathing example of where there was 1.2 million ounces at 7 grams per tonne. What we have done is said, okay, based on the geometry and the sorts of grades, something like a Kapor could add anywhere between 250,000 and 500,000 ounces of additional resource. Now, we're not going to say, oh yes, well, we've identified 16 of these features, so therefore multiply the number of 16, and there's your exploration target for Pedroo. Our people have been conservative and said, well, look, you might only get 2 or 3 of those that come in. And when you go through each of our individual prospect areas and do the same sort of, if you like, sensitivity or variability analysis, that's why you end up building up with an exploration target of 4.9 to 9.3 million ounces. It's because there is such a large, there's a multitude of potential targets, and no one's going to say, oh, well, you know, that all of them will come in, or, you know, potentially none of them will come in. So you end up carrying that that range through.
Ray, what are Besra's plans to deal with potential metallurgical challenges?
One of the things, and I haven't really addressed it, and it's a good question that you ask, you'll see in the prospectus that part of our strategy is very much, because we're looking at our this is all part of our pre-development, pre-production strategy. And you'll see in our prospectus under our business strategy that key limbs of that include processing and metallurgical studies. Now, previously, in other studies that have been historically undertaken, we had concentrated more on the Dugan area. Some work had been done in some of the other areas. But one of the things that you can take away from this is that we've got a multiple of potential deposits. And you could be looking at a future development that involves an integrated approach where you've got where you're basically providing feedstock into a centralized processing hub. Now, to do that sort of thing, that's where you need to have detailed metallurgical analysis done right along the corridor. And as you can imagine, across a 15-kilometre strike length corridor, you are going to get variations in metallurgy. And so a key part of what will happen as a result of the current drilling we're doing, as well as other work that we'll be undertaking quite independently, is to look at those metallurgical and obviously how that fits in with optimizing our potential processing streams.
Final one for you, Ray. As far as gold provinces go, can you just provide a bit of background on the geology in the Sarawak state region, and particularly the Pedroo Shale?
Yeah, sure. Look, the host geology, that is the Pedroo Shale and the Bau limestone, late Jurassic, early Cretaceous, so the Mesozoic rock types. As you can see, down in the Pedroo area, where the host is in the Bau limestone, the sequences down there are fairly flat. And hence when I talk to the Pedroo wireframe, it's quite elongate with some offsets around faulting, etc. So it's a fairly easy, flat-lying, strata-bound type mineralization. The Pedroo Shale itself is much more ductile, and as a result, it responded differently to the compressional and structural deformation forces of the region. And hence, at Dugan, for example, we've got that quite steeply dipping, plunging mineralization trend in that area. So there is a change in the styles of mineralization that we see in the area. And we also have mineralization associated with dacitic and, if you like, porphyry style mineralization. So we've actually got 4 key styles of mineralization within the area, and in fact, some previous authors have identified, you know, subgroups up to 16. So there is quite a variety, and of course, implicit in that variety in the style of the geology and the mineralization is also aspects of the metallurgy that we spoke of earlier. And the other thing is that the actual source of the mineralization is, as I mentioned, mid-tertiary.
Thanks, Ray. Well, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you all for joining me, and I'd also like to thank Ray for presenting and taking the time to answer some questions. As I mentioned before, a recording of the webinar will be on Ray's website and social media platforms later today, obviously the Besra social media platform specifically. Ray, before I let you go, do you have any final comments to leave with us today?
Look, it's there are a few opportunities around like Besra, and all the more so at the moment. You know, once the story is out there and people understand what the scope of this of Besra and the Bau story is, there'll be a lot of people kicking themselves that they weren't early movers on it. So I'll leave it at that.
Fantastic. That wraps it up for us here. Thank you, everyone. And Ray, as always, thanks very much for joining me today.
Thanks very much for that, Alex. Thank you, everyone.